Hello, everybody. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the first draft that I wrote up. It would be very, like you said, difficult to understand and kind of choppy, or seen that way, because of the nature of the topic. Really, self-care, in a way, is best understood as kind of the unlearned lesson. So it's comprised of things that people don't know from different eras in time, from different kind of health practices, from all these kind of missing links. So it's very pretty interesting challenge to kind of put into words or put into a form that actually stays true to the topic and also does not get people lost in thinking it is something that it's not. Right? So if we just think about it for a quick second, how do you talk about something that most people don't know exists, right? It's one lesson that you didn't learn. And to be able to do that, I found that it was very tricky just using words themselves, because words are symbols, and as soon as you identify something with a symbol, you can lose the whole meaning. So if I say there's something like an apple, you're going to really be thinking apple even when I tell you what the thing is. Like, this is something I've been trying to work out for about 9 years, so it is a very tricky thing. So in the presentation, it uses body posture, language. It uses phrasing and wording that kind of leaves the mind open to perceive a new way of thinking about things. And it very much has its own kind of story flow to it. These different things interacting with each other and the atmosphere that we'll be in will help bring across the point of what self-care really is. I find that really any other way of constructing it leads the person down the wrong path, if you will. So at the beginning of the presentation, where I have that box that I use as my prop, and I do different kind of movement patterns on it, this essentially is to show people something that they're not sure what it really is, right? It keeps the mind open. In the beginning, we're talking in the language, if you will, of physical expression, physical movement, and therefore people get drawn into that kind of atmosphere. And then we'll take a short break, if you will, where I change the wording and the kind of posturing to mirror that, which is more of a mind way, a logical thinking process of being able to take on this exact same physical thing that was demonstrated. And then we start solving for that missing piece. So as I give more information at this point, people are going to be thinking about how are they going to solve this problem. I'll tell them that it is essentially what they're looking at is the process of how we live life and interact with things in a physical way. Then I'll tell them that it's part of self-care. Then I'll tell them really it's the unique potential that lies within all of us that makes us all stand out. And this is the ability to create multiple realities or situations from the exact same object, right? So this is kind of a mind twist at that point, which comes across better, I guess, in talking in this way, but there's a little bit more to it. So at that point, now we realize this thing that we're talking about is now in the mental realm of solving the problem, right? And then at that point, once people are kind of drawn into that atmosphere, I'll switch once again to the third language, which is going to be that of emotion or energy, energizing something. So this is going to be an analogy to how one kind of colors the world, right? If you're an angry person, things are a little bit more bitter or frustrating. And use the analogy using the box as kind of a symbol of this anger, and then I will be the person doing the body language of how I interact with this box, so that people can see the kind of full story and full expression of this interaction, and then have this link. Again, because most of these things are known to people, but are not very consciously focused on, most of this content is going to be subconscious. So it's all going to make a lot of sense in the presentation part. Again, another thinking around self-care is it by nature causes people to ask deeper and more questions. It's not particularly chewing up the information for you and making you solve it immediately. It does make you think and bring you on that journey of thought that brings you to realize the benefits of how self-care works. So that's another key factor in the self-care idea. Moving from that point, after we energize this world and we show people that, this is how we deal with emotions and why we get energy to do certain tasks, good or bad, then the story kind of comes to a full spectrum. I talk about, when we're reiterating, I talk about all the facts that bring these pieces together and how mental, physical, at this time I start giving names to the processes, where before it was kind of open and loose, so people didn't attach something to it and they're ready to take in the new information. Now at this point I say, we've learned the language of physical, mental, and emotional health. These are the things that work together. You cannot be healthy without these three things being in balance, and what that looks like is exactly the kind of things that we're talking about. Oh yeah, again, just before I finish off showing those three pieces of ways of thinking, I do add the kind of fourth, which is the self-care version. So what would it look like if, instead of anger, this person got the appropriate, let's say, emotional feedback, the appropriate mental feedback, and the appropriate physical feedback? How would this change and interact with this person's life? And this really would make all the difference, allowing the person to now grow towards their potential, not focus on their failures, and also then be able to bring about a positive personal culture of health around them, regardless of where they are location-wise, regardless of the challenge, mental, physical, or emotion. They'll be able to use the whole experience, if you will, to be able to navigate health and the different challenges of life. Again, self-care is something that's supposed to grow with the person throughout their life, and therefore always continually add benefit and growth towards their potential of health. This is similar to the idea of philosophy. Philosophy is not something you could learn when you're 15. It is something you need some life experience with and about, so that you are able to achieve the deeper potential of what this thing means. Self-care is very similar in the sense that it is one of the original healths, quickly stating in the fact that self-care comes from self-preservation being the lesser version, self-care being the higher version. All things that we do in the health industry are ways of taking care of self: physio, massage, chiropractic, osteopathy, all these things. So therefore, self-care is at the very root of it all. And the challenge is explaining all that without it being attached to these things before I get to the main meaning. So this is the style of presentation that I've had to use. Again, it's not particularly my choice. It's the only way to bring across the depth of the topic in a way that is useful without going into a whole bunch of very highly scientific style speech, which I don't think is even reflective of what self-care is. It just would make more sense to the people that think in that style. So we are, in this sense, also addressing the topic from different ways of perceiving life. Generally, there are three: the mental way of thinking it, logic, and kind of straightforwardness; the emotional way, going through the feelings and ups and downs of the presentation with the person that I'm using as the kind of story in the way; and then also the physical, watching the body language, watching the reactions. And we are all very cognizant of these things. Body language is a whole thing, right? There's a whole industry about that. So I'm putting all these things into play to really start to describe the experience of what self-care is. Hopefully that makes a little sense. This is my rough draft. However, I do think that this is going to be the model that I'll be using, and the rest will kind of fill in. I will add more things, make more points on different gestures. Again, this won't particularly come across in writing. It's more going to be a presentation thing. And before the presentation can make a little sense, I need to fill you in on those pieces. Not that I think people won't be easily able to fill in on those pieces, but because you're looking at the work at a specific mindset, it's going to be hard to decipher that information on paper for sure and stick to an old way of thinking. We really do need to, when we're taking on this fresh, brand new topic, we need to open mind up to really get the depth of it. So that will be part of the challenge of the presentation and part of the challenge of people being open to a new idea. And I think this is a great platform to do so because we're talking about new ideas. And I think that allows us to be open to new ways of presenting information and still getting the same point across, but we're going to have to use different pieces to get this done. Hopefully that makes a little sense to you. This is the rough idea of the presentation, and we'll be going on those kind of topics. Thank you so much for your time and understanding. I hope that makes a little more sense to you. Thank you.